Good day, Resistance. This is Esoteric Radio, and we wanted to thank everyone for tuning in to the show today. We want to send wholeness and balance vibration out. It is Sunday, August the 8th, and we are broadcasting a phenomenal show today titled Esoteric, Our Complex, the Catch-22, and the Code Woman Omen. And I'm your host, along with my co-host. I'm your host, Sevan, and my co-host is Sun. And I'm going to allow just for a moment for Sun to say a couple things before we get right into this. This show is scheduled for an hour and a half. There's a lot of content that needs to be covered today. In fact, this might just be the part one of this particular series because there's just so much information to bring out. And before I get right into this, Sun, are you connected on the line?
Yes, you can hear me clear?
I can hear you loud and clear, baby.
I just wanted to say wholeness to Resistance family, and just look forward to building with you guys. We have a lot to show you in the future, and just hold on and enjoy the show. Excellent.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remember the goal of all of our work is to get everyone into higher stages of enlightenment. And it's quite a trip. This is a trip that we're all taking together. I'm just a little aggressive at pursuing the truth, and what I do is I find through the cipher what I know to be the truth, and I bring that information back to my brothers and sisters and present it before them because we feel that is a noble deed. In addition to that, because we all are in a reality that is interwoven and connected, that means that ascension to individuals on this planetary system would mean ascension for everyone else that is attempting to achieve that. And so this is our attempt at doing that. And I only say attempt in these cases because it still is a person's choice. So we will present the facts. We'll present a lot of information, especially the illustrations of what exactly is taking place on this dimension. And then we leave it up to the listener, the viewer, or the studier, the seeker, etc., to make their own decision on what has been presented. I wanted to start off the show today by saying a few things, and one is that keeping in mind that spiritual or esoteric knowledge and the quest to obtain what would be called the Great Arcanum, the Philosopher's Stone, the Panacea, etc., is a life's quest, and that extends multiple lives. It's an ever quest. And so at times when you're receiving information, it's very vast, and sometimes you feel like you don't understand. And I wanted to let everyone know that that is perfectly fine, that it is your subconscious mind that picks up a great deal of information. And if you allow the information to pass through you and allow your body to absorb that information, then you can feel what's necessary for you to hear at this moment. I would also like to say that everything is in perspective, meaning that you can look at a situation two ways, always on a binary dimension, and there will be always one of those ways in which it benefits you. Much of what we'll talk about now, today, is actually about the history of mankind that's embedded within the language and embedded within the symbolism that is choosing to be evoked by the dimension. And but that does allow us at times to go into areas that are a little bit touchy for individuals. I would also like to say that in the history of man, because we are in a womb, we are in a matrix or a ma, what they say is a womb, a place where something is cultivated. At times it is dark, and that is just a phase of the primordial part of existence. And then when one gets into higher stages of understanding the totality of existence, that's where things begin to have a higher hue or spectrum. So we'll get right in. For those that are looking to interact with the interactive show, we are available now at www.matrixunderground.com. That's www.matrixunderground.com. What we do is we have an interactive show where people are allowed to follow along with what we're presenting, and we also have pictures, sometimes movies associated with the particular topic that we're discussing. And once again, for those that are tuning into that, that's www.matrixunderground.com. So the title of the show, again, was Our Complex, the Catch-22 and Code Woman Omen. That's the original title of the show, although it's been adjusted somewhat. And this came about because a good friend of the Resistance, a lady by the name of Jahara, sent David Icke's recent book, which is Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More. And it took a while for that book to get to me because I am a foreign country. I'm in a foreign country. And but once I was able to get the book, I was able to absorb a few chapters that were key to me, so I can just put a lot more of my data together that I've been gathering myself on the dimension. I did find the book personally to be a good read. It is very repetitious, but they, of course, say repetition is the key to getting through to people. Anyone that has read David Icke's work, there are a few chapters of some new things that have been added to his whole collection of knowledge. And in general, the book is written for individuals that are just beginning to understand what's taking place on the dimension, to begin to go from a process of a stair-stepping process, meaning learning the basics and then getting into the deeper stuff. But in this, there was a lot of questions that were being sent to me about what David Icke was explaining in regards to the moon matrix, or the control system that's been taking place from the moon, and whether I thought that's authentic or not. And of course, with not having read the complete part in itself, then I couldn't give them a judgment on what I felt about the perspective David Icke himself was coming from, but I do know of a lot of the different involvements that have been taking place on the moon. But there was a lot more data that was brought by David Icke that allows us to get to a higher level of knowledge, because when we combine that with the data that we already have, the pieces begin to fit, making us whole. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about this word woman. A while ago, when I was ciphering words, as is done all day, remember that we're cracking a code. We're cracking into what we call the code of the matrix, or the meaning behind the words. And we're taking the language that's most relevant and primarily used by us, which happens to be English. We're basically catering to a crowd that speaks English, at least as their secondary language. But because English itself is a language that has swept the world and everyone is being encouraged to learn that language, we decided to pull the language apart from an esoteric standpoint. That led to many things. It led to many epiphanies and synchronistic occurrences on the dimension, and it leads to what I believe is a very high level of enlightenment on this dimension, because whether you want to accept the information or not, you have a finite system to go by that allows you to be able to determine whether or not something is true or false. So where we're at now in this is because what I begin this post is talking about First Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 through 9. And I thought it very important that I start today's message off with this, because I want to say, I said in the beginning so that I wanted to say a few things, and I guess this is the final thing. In your reality, when you begin to become conscious, you begin to associate with conscious individuals, and some people use Facebook as that channel because it's the most popular at this point. And you have those people that are communicating on your page and sending you emails, and you may at times believe that the enlightenment is coming to the whole world. And true enough, enlightenment is definitely spreading, and it's becoming something that's a lot more popular, especially within the younger crowds. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily enlightenment. I would just say it's the occult. The occult itself is becoming more popular in the younger crowds, and it's becoming just as popular as bell bottoms. And what I want everyone to understand is that for those that are engaging into the esoteric works, is that there is still, and I'd like to be conservative, 92% of the world that is not engaging in real acts of enlightenment or esoteric knowledge. They're still stuck under belief systems and dogmas that are structured for the political agendas of this kingdom. So it's of great importance for those that already understand their level of adeptness. They know that they still have the duty of bringing their knowledge and their particular path or role to the individuals that are around them. So never can we fool ourselves at any point to believe that the greater percentage of this dimension is becoming enlightened. That's not what's happening right now. That is something that we want to make happen. Still understanding also, we approach all of what we do with a very rational, very exact standpoint. There's no use in dreaming. We need exact information and actual information. And so where that leads us to at this point is it leads us to examining everything for its authenticity and bringing real-time information back to our brothers and sisters to let them know where we're exactly at, where's our status on the dimension. Furthermore, I'll talk a little bit just briefly about the 100th monkey syndrome, which is being mentioned now a lot, especially in the areas of individuals who are aspiring to become adept and aspiring to change the world with their message or with their method. And they speak of that if they can allow we can allow this ascension to come to 100th monkey point, which means, well, one person gets it at the 100th monkey or the 100th person, then everyone starts to do the same thing. But the actuality of it is that what we're dealing with on the dimension right now is that 100th monkey syndrome has already taken place with the dark side of the occult. Meaning that at this point, because of the influence from media and Jew, that's J-U, or any way that you can pronounce it, Jupiter or Father Jew, or Jupiter, as it's called, because of that influence, then the world itself that's being susceptible to this media is being occultated into the dark arts. And it's reached its 100th monkey. So, in order for these individuals that are involved in this, some on the surface level, some much too deep, but in order for them to actually be able to see where they're possibly in error or could be heading in the wrong direction, they would have to get a full understanding of exactly what they're dealing with. I was speaking to an individual the other day, and me and that individual both agreed that most of the individuals that are practicing in the occult world have very little understanding or understanding of what they're exactly involved in, because they're utilizing the tools of basically the same tools that have always been here, the books, the levels of divination, the geometry within the Venusian initiations, the pentagrams, etc., and that they're only getting a feedback from that channel. So they have a very narrow picture of what's going on, not to mention the greatest danger, which is imagining that the spiritual life is a road to riches. It is true enough that once one achieves the great attainment, then riches itself is one of what they call the sevenfold spirit, or just one of the things like glory, power, riches, honor that you receive once you obtain this higher state. However, if one is to pursue the esoteric works for just riches, then they will most certainly be turned back and confused. So that is bred about with society taking organic itself and making it as a business model. It is turned into the esoteric world, if you want to give it that term now, being turned into a place where people just say what will get them a higher position or more favor within the audience. And this is unfortunate since the audience is really listening to be educated, but if the speaker is only saying what he can say to keep a higher audience, then of course the truth is not going to come out as fast, at least. So what we do here is we bring it straight up, and then that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to get started here, and we're going to read the scripture, Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 through 9. And it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and one speech." And I'll start there by saying that speech and language obviously wasn't either of the two. It was communication through the mind. And it says, "And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city in a tower whose top may reach unto the heavens, and let us make us a name. Lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the God came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men had built. And the dog said, Behold, the people are as one, and they have all one language, and this they began to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." Now, some people see I inserted dog there where it should say God, but for anyone that understands the etymology behind these words, every single word means something actually. And it's not what you think it means if you don't understand the cipher within the words. It never deviates. So regardless of what you feel like you're saying, it doesn't mean that you're going to override the actual master code on the language, meaning that if you use the word God, it's just like you're using the word dog, because the numerical equivalent within these two words are the same. So if G equals 1 and O equals 2 and D equals 3, it still equals 6. And no matter how you turn it around, so whether it's Ogdo, whether it's dog, or whether it's God, it's all from a Germanic system in which their God is known as Gud, where you get words like good from. So what we're really dealing with here is that this should be the first hint. Notice the chapter is 11. The number of 11 is the number of division. It's 2. It's peace. So what's taking place here is the time in which a person should understand, if they're involved in any of these kind of religions that support this Old Testament, that they're obviously not dealing with a God that has their best interest in mind as far as harmony is concerned. Because here we see that the whole earth is on this unison language where everyone and everything is communicating and things are getting done and there's much progress being made. To understand a little bit of the Earth's history is to understand the reconfiguration of the brain. The brain that we're using now has been reconfigured. The first brain of the original, the mammalian humanoid species that lived here had several different compartments to hold separate brains. In fact, we found skulls, or pictures of skulls that have 4 holes in them. So through this upgrading process, what you're seeing is the loss of actual perception of what's really going on beyond Earth's current wavelength, which is a matrix. So what we're really dealing with here is that we're dealing with another being that is watching us. You know, the term they use is watcher. And then they decide, since we've now gone into this quantum thinking, because understand, they say man and woman may have been dumb at some point. But that doesn't mean they continuously were dumb. Because what they're showing in the histories is that just as aggressively as we're accumulating information now, we're accumulating 6,000 years worth of information every 3 months. That's the same thing that happened previously with the human brain. It started to gather, once it had a couple basic building blocks, it began to aggressively accumulate information. And of course, we have heard of preceding empires that had very advanced technology and things of that nature. So what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with a situation here in this Bible, which is known as, the easiest term is a prison religion, where the individual or the God is saying, well, we're going to go down and confuse them. Now, also see here that the God actually goes down to see the tower, or in the city. However, if you are already there, like if you're in God mode, which some of us are very familiar with, or on the Keeper, when you look down, you see everything. So if you're not on God mode, then you bear the burden of having to go down and do your physical thing and look at it, or vicariously look through someone else. And so basically, right here in chapter 11 of Genesis, you're getting the real character of exactly who the author is of this particular book. So it continues, and it says if they'll accomplish anything like this on unison and in harmony. Let us go down and confound their language. But is this not the same God that says he's not the author of confusion? So this is what I'm talking about. This is the veil that sits on everyone's eyes that continues to believe in this type of stuff from the level of not utilizing it as an instruction tool, of a way to leave Earth, but not directly. A hidden code of a level of domination that takes places in the mind, like we talk about, they're mining the mind, and use it as that type of tool rather than what one is putting their hope in for what I've now I'm looking at least 22 crucified saviors now, but to be very light, we'll just say for the last 2,000 years we've been waiting on something when the only people that we're waiting on is ourselves. So what we have here is I pulled an ancient plaques of Isis. This is the picture that you see that's below the bird that is showing you all the hues of the color spectrum. And for those that are just tuning in, we're at www.matrixunderground.com. That's www.matrixunderground.com. Also, our parent site is www.resistance2010.com. That's www.resistance2010.com. What you're looking at here on the matrixunderground.com is you're looking at a picture of Isis in its antiquity. And it's where I snipped this particular picture from. It also said that, of course, her priests were adept, and they were originators of language, meaning that Isis is actually taking credit in the ancient books as being the creator of languages, which is most interesting because if we see that the confounding of our path began when we started to actually get all of these languages and begin to think that we were so separate from each other. We were even saying the same words like el, al, il, o, and ul. But because we had been given vowels, we didn't understand that it was just L. And so this level of, but there's also, there's more going on here, of course. There's something that actually makes a person believe that it's all okay and that it'll all work itself out. And they only can think about this very seriously for a moment before they immediately recline back into their normal lifestyle. So there's obviously some other level in which things are being controlled from a mental standpoint. That's not just what a person is accepting to believe. So that's what we're actually going to get into today. What we're going to get into is we're going to get into how minds can be manipulated by frequency and what that's led to. And we're going to talk about a real superstructure, meaning that how is this whole thing underpinned? Because what the main thing that I learned is that, yes, if we use Earth as a training cycle, then, and we learn what was the cream of the knowledge to learn here, we will be in the best position. However, if we continue to eat the scraps from the master's table, it was killing us slowly anyway. So we exist in a dimension where we're literally being poisoned from all angles, so everyone needs to be aware of that. Fluoride, TV, frequencies, smog, you name it. But the fact is that when that's going on, you should understand it from the level of where how the military deals with things. When the military detects a leak or a problem, they advise their officials and deal with it based on what they have in front of them. That's real-time information. They don't do wishful thinking. So if we understand that there's programming and things going on in the dimension, that means that there's literally an attack on us. Now, what TV has done is TV it does a certain thing to the brain also, amongst the many things that it does. But when you watch a horror movie, or you watch a movie where someone gets killed, or you even watch the news and someone gets killed, in order for you to be able to accept that and to go about the rest of your day, your brain actually overrides a certain part of your mind that makes you believe that that's real. So whether you're even watching news or a movie, your brain sends now a signal that says, but that's not real. And so what's happening even with what's really going on in a dimension like this upcoming deadline about 2012 and extraterrestrial involvement and Venusian magic and sorcerers and secret societies, the mind of most individuals just reverts back into that same default mode of, I can't pay attention to this because it's overwhelming for me, because I can't do anything about it. But here we are to tell you that the resistance is strong, and we're actually here doing something about this situation from a level of principalities, meaning that some are still encouraging individuals to go march downtown and write for their politician, but these are just branches on the tree. They're not roots. In order to deal with this situation, because it's underpinned by mysticism, you would have to have a firm understanding of mysticism. So what our contribution is to cross over what science has discovered, the advancements that we've learned in the languages, and several different things that we now have in our possession, like the internet. And to apply that now to our understanding of what we believe is taking place here in this galaxy. And the most interesting part is that I will tell individuals this. Before, when people look at these problems that are going on from this hyperdimensional level even, sometimes they were just overwhelmed. Oh, there's no way we could get out of something like this. But the fact of the matter is that integers like the internet itself being introduced make those notions non-rational, not correct. Because we can affect people, places, and things, what they call virally, meaning in one day, if 1 million people get together and set an intention at a certain hour and a time that everyone has across the board and makes an intention across the planet, then that's going to happen. So I still see that the potential of this society is great, but there's a level of being creator that now many people are being introduced to, not everyone. This is kind of the next level of things. This is where one goes up, another one goes up, another one goes up, and then on the opposite side, one goes down, another one goes down, another one goes down, meaning that this is the part of society where we actually get a chance to upgrade or downgrade, like it says, behold, I saw the ladder going up and down, into another existence, because this one is finite, because it's material. So, 2 questions in the world. Why am I here? And what happens when I die? These are the 2 biggest questions on this binary dimension that we're calling Earth. So, if everyone would scroll down from this picture of the adept Isis, who also goes by the name Venus, uses very different symbolism, such as the owl, such as the clamshell, many different symbols. We can understand that this is something that's taking place on this dimension in real time, and it behooves us to figure out exactly what's going on in order for us to get in a position of being from children to adults. Now, this has nothing to do with your age. People are being treated like children here on this dimension at 50, 60 years old. They're being given very little knowledge about what's really going on, and many of them have had no choice but to revert back into the old way of doing things because there doesn't appear to be any new path in plain sight. And as we talked about before, in order to build a new path, you probably would need to know the construct of the path in which you're on already. Still understanding that leaving Earth's dimension means that every single thing about this Earth, from tables to chairs to sunlight to plants, may not apply in the next dimension that you're going to. In fact, generally, there's nothing from a previous dimension that's inside of a whole new dimension, because that's what makes it new. So we'll talk a moment about what's between the numbers. What you see after 1.0 is 1.1 ad infinity, meaning that you can go infinitely behind the actual number 1 in the decimal point. And each of those numbers actually equal experience. So this means relatively that if you wanted to stay on Earth and continuously experiencing variations of E3, as I call it, Earth's third rock from the sun, third dimension, or E is the 3, it's just turned the other way. So if you want to stay on E3, then you can be here infinitely, because the decimal point continues to cipher more and more realities, more and more constructs of the same thing. Though you'll still see buildings, you'll still see chairs, you'll see anything that you can see on TV, futuristic buildings, etc., but it still will be a construct of E3. So I wanted to talk about ME for a moment. ME in the Sumerian text were these things that they kept referring to that the gods were in possession of. MEs. And it says that this being, also known then as Ishtar, who is Isis, who's Ashtaroth, who's Inanna, etc., was actually a mortal woman that tricked the god into giving her 1. Now, many people have been confused that have run through these texts about MEs, but because we have the cipher now, we know the ME itself, as I have written down here, it says that MEs, or holy words, are programs, sigils, designs that unfold into the whole whole belief system of our government, of the government over our species. So basically, the ME is something that you bring into a planet that you see at its preliminary stage, because you can imagine the levels of existence outside of this wavelength. So it's very easy for something on the higher wavelength to see something starting to develop and say, okay, well, this is the time in which we should move in. But when you move in, people need to understand magic is not poof. Magic is, there's a repetition, there's a system that exists in between that. There's actually, if you want to go get something out of the kitchen, or you want a glass out of the kitchen, to make it appear in front of you, there are certain things that have to happen in order for that to take place. Either you have to get up and walk and go get it. You can, for those who have the mind strength, they can imagine it and pull it over to them and have it float into the air and land there. For those who choose to use elementals, the elemental can go get it and bring it back, and it's almost like it's invisible. And so there's all these different methods, but something is going to happen in between there. And so that's what MEs really were. They were actual diagrams to take species to the level in which was determined by the ME. So if the ME says, we want this system to be run on material, here's the language, here's the design, go and give it to the species that are there. Here are some of the things to implant into the environment. Here's some of the plants and things that are needed from other planetary systems that keep that level of control going on. Here are the frequencies, the list of frequencies that are needed to keep this going on. And so this is what we're really looking at, and it's a good time that we're now in, because we're able to actually analyze exactly what I call God science, genesis or genetic scientists. So when you look at what David Icke is leading into, and what many people have been hinting around, is that basically the whole construct of how this is working is being controlled from the moon, amongst many other places, but the moon being. In addition to that, you have, of course, a control center on Venus and a control center on Mars. But still understand that these control centers only exist because Venus and Mars and the moon are pre-programmed, that you're accepting that exist because of what you've seen from NASA, what you see when you look in the sky, and what you think you feel. But to understand that the spirit itself is been put inside of an actual receptor, a vessel. Meaning that the spirit in itself is more like untamed, unbridled horse, something of this nature. And that's why in a lot of the death pictures you see the horse or the unicorn chained down the earth. It's chained down by the body. As you see what Tool is saying, he's saying this body is holding me, and it's reminding me that this is an illusion. And that's, of course, this is coming out of the mouth of individuals who've already gone down that road, into that path. So what we're doing now is we're going to highlight exactly what the paths consist of, and that should definitely bring one to understand how to undo what I call the firmware. But before we do that, I want to take a quick moment. I want to converse with Sun to see how our lines are doing, to see if there was any questions that we need to answer at this point, and just to give a general check on things.
Okay, we have one caller on the line. And that caller, if you have a question, you just press 1, and that will raise your hand, and then we'll be able to address you, 505. And as far as the chat room, if anyone has any questions, you can just type it in the chat room, and we'll ask it. But other than that, everything is smooth.
Okay. All right, so we'll just go ahead and continue to go forward. So what you'll see here below this picture of Isis is you'll see this diagram that was drawn up, I think, yesterday. And this was a time where some nice transmissions were definitely coming through about just putting it all together in black and white, because a lot of this stuff just keep in my mind. And when you put it in black and white or right in front of you, you kind of get a bigger part of the picture. And so remember, for those that are just tuning in, we're on www.matrixunderground.com. That's the interactive show. We're here with a picture that actually looks like a billboard or a whiteboard, and it's written on with marker. And you can actually click that picture in order to blow it up, because it goes quite large, so that everyone can see what I drew here. And so basically what we're dealing with here, and I'm going to make this as simple as possible, is we're dealing with a higher level of influence. In this particular construct, it appears that the reptilian species has implemented a program that has jammed our wavelengths to allow us to be only perceptive of certain things. Originally, between the lion, the serpent, and many different breeds of higher breeds of animals, there obviously, with the serpent, has been certain issues. there are certain parts of this ideology that the serpent carries that is now being referred to now as the R complex, or the reptilian portion of the brain. And it's said that these beings tap into humanity because of this particular insertion. So this is what we see. We see that in the DNA that there, of course, there's an insertion within the DNA. We see that in the brain that there's been an insertion within the brain. So just from these two alone, you can now control things spiritually and physically. Controlling them from an auric level, which is what their DNA does. It controls the wavelengths and the signatures and frequencies of their aura. And then the brain, which is the control module for the whole body. So this is the actual insert that has caused the mankind to be in what they call a fallen state. Fallen to me only means that you can be at a higher state. It's in perspective for me. I don't go into the stories of what we were before and how things were great and then we ruined it and now we're here paying for things. There's no knowledge of that. In fact, it seems to me that if you were being punished for something and now you're here on earth and that's what your punishment is, it would probably be more of a punishment if they just told you that's what was going on. So the stories about that the humans are here because they're being punished because they did something because they were originally high beings and now they're fallen here, I don't go with that story. That's the prison religion. That's you did something wrong from the start. I'm not going to tell you what you did, but you're forever trying to get back. You're forever trying to get back into a good state with me. This type of relationship, even if you look at that on a relationship level, like if you have a significant other and the significant other is always hanging something over your head and saying, well, because of something you did wrong, which I'm not telling you, it's made me feel a certain type of way, and until that changes, I don't really want to deal with you. So what kind of relationship is this? Human race has to understand that if we're here speaking out, this is because we're supposed to. If we're here talking about this, and I've seen a lot of people discussing many parts of what I'm discussing today as far as the ascension of our species, this means that we should do this anyway, because if we just sit back and let Earth continue in this Ouroboros cycle, it's going to be destroyed here in a moment. And that's, again, everyone's TV reality has them not wanting to accept that. But realistically, this planet can't, this matrix, this virtual reality cannot take the actual chaos vibration of what people are being occultated to accept, which is destruction of the dimension. This is pervade all over the dimension with the gods that are continuously being evoked that people have no idea what they're about, and they just keep using their symbols, using their pictures. Because someone asked me, well, how do I get myself out of this? And I said, well, get rid of all the things that you have that are related to that, unless you're using them for dissecting and studying. Meaning that if you're not a Christian anymore, but you still like the baby angel your grandmother gave you, come on. To understand an angel is an angle, and they're going to always have an angle when they come at you. There's going to be a motive there. So what I want to talk about, number one on this list is jumping. What I discovered basically is that how this whole thing is wired together is everyone's wired in. So the veins in your hands and the meridians of your body actually are the ley lines of this planet. And in addition to that, this planet, and this is fractals as they call it, this planet has another set of ley lines so our body has a set of ley lines that correspond to the planet. The planet has a set of ley lines that correspond to the other planets in the whole galaxy, et cetera, et cetera. So it keeps broadening out that this system is interwoven within itself. They call it circles within circles. So just like you see with your veins, there's certain areas that cross. And when those areas that cross, of course, they're stronger because they have two veins. And so what you're looking at in this map is you'll see it says 4 and 8, Mars, Earth, 3, Venus, 13, and 5. And in the center, you'll see what looks like a Vesica Pisces. These are what I know to be portals that are configured all around our planet that allow these beings to actually be on third density. Because here's the thing. if you're a fourth density being, you can't hang out on 3D anyway unless you're in a fourth density state, meaning fourth density sphere, meaning an area on third dimension that's been consecrated for fourth dimension energy, which is say pyramids are. There are places in which fourth dimensional beings can live inside of. If they come out of that, something won't work properly. And we won't get into the multiple things that could happen if a fourth dimensional being went full on into a third dimensional wavelength. So what happens is you have these portals that are on Earth that generally are where they lay these churches, where they lay these sacred monuments, where they lay these ancient buildings, wonders of the world, etc. And so what is really going on here on Earth is that it's being manipulated from a higher and a lower level, and that is also affecting our body. So it's no wonder that when a matrix such as Earth gets saturated with symbolisms, churches, and things like that on the ley lines, the general cure to that is to shake it all off. To actually, there's an earthquake and a cataclysm and water and all this stuff, just to get all the garbage off the ley lines of the previous species that was there and keep it going again. Keep them discovering and building again. So what we're really dealing with here is that there's a number system that the elite are going by in order to get them to the dimensions that they need to get to. Like if, for those that have watched They Lived, they could see that in one area where they got to the underground base, where these beings that clearly were perceived to be reptilians were shooting themselves to other planets through this device, and that's called jumping. There's also a movie Jumper that says that basically if you have a picture of it at least once, you can jump to it. Meaning that if you ever seen the Nebular 5 on Quasar 1 and you had that image in your picture in your mind, you can always jump to it if your faculties are straight. So that's why humans are sometimes depicted as fish that must be netted by the Egyptian gods calling themselves netters, or the Christian gods calling themselves fishers of men, because they move. It would be difficult to capture a human being if they can think and immediately be projected to wherever they're going to go, wherever they think they're going to go, and wherever they've been. So this jumping ability is something that we still have inside of us that some have turned on. Most people jump every night, and they jump in their dreams, but sometimes they don't jump very far because of the level of energy within the body, the chi energy in the body. Now, I'll tell you that what's happening here on Earth is that everything is within the language. So until a person actually goes inside and learns how to intone, which is number 7, we'll talk about that, but once intoning starts taking place, there's going to be very little that's really not influenced by this dimension. Okay, when you say I, you're saying dragon. Okay, the Chinese word is the oldest word that can be found for the letter I. It means dragon. If you look in many different texts, you see chi means dragon. So that's no different than the chi energy and the kundalini energy, also depicted as dragon and serpent. So basically you're living on a dimension that every single thing that they want to show you of any power has something to do with a snake. This is a clear influencing or programming, because we are now smart enough to know that everything does not come just from the serpent. But how is it that the serpent has risen itself up to make itself originator, or everyone wants to make everyone, it has made everyone believe that it is the originator? What kind of game is this? So, the moon in position to Earth is perfectly positioned as such to cause the eclipse, because the sun in itself bringing energy through our moon, so basically the energy that will come from our sun is tampered and reconstrued by the moon and then projected to us through frequency. Your every thought is being somewhat manipulated because all of those frequencies are radio frequencies. And that's what we're discovering now with the advent of the GB4000 frequency generator machine that we've acquired. And for those that want to see that, they can check out the Resistance Paranormal Division video. But when you tap in, notice in most cities, there's a 99.1. That is actually a portion and part of your cerebral cortex, your brain, And there's always something broadcasting there. And, of course, there's a 105.9. And so all of these actual frequencies, because they're actually energies, this is the difference between radio frequencies and audio frequencies. One is actually energy. These energies are permeating the brain all the time with Christina Aguilera and the rest of the dirty stuff. So this affects a person's level of being able to stay focused on exactly what the situation is. In addition to that, we have some type of involvement where the species that has been, making this happen, which will be shortly disposed of, as like I said, there's a truce that's looming, and there's only a short period of time for that to finish taking place. And whatever if the sides agree, then we can now have harmony. And if there is no agreement, then there will be a removal of the Tyrannosaurus. So there's been this manipulation, and that manipulation is actually taking place also with the woman. And that was the biggest epiphany that I've come into since last week, because it's continuing to get stronger. The more that you learn, the more it puts other pieces together. So because woman is also carrying a womb, she's been used to portal, basically, bring other existences into this planet. Her physical body has been now used to do that, to bring beings externally into the planet, because a woman or feline being naturally, which is a part of our counterpart, we're supposed to be together in spirit anyway, meaning that when we exist in the cosmos, we're male-female, and when we birth, we do it internally. And so what's happening now is that the female is being used to birth externally, but because of her susceptibility to or having this magnetic womb matrix in her stomach, she's also directly connected to the moon. And this becomes what I call catch-22, because most of us as men are very fond of women in the female species, and wherever we go throughout the galaxy, we would hope that there's women there. And so what happens here is that I discovered the most treacherous plot by this dominant species that is actually, it's just depicting itself as a reptilian. There was something that just recently took place with rockets that were being fired at the moon, and they were searching for water. Okay. For anyone in the know, this is the silliest excuse for why they're firing rockets at the moon. It immediately says, I'm doing something else. But regardless of what they were doing, because many people they have their notions, but the fact is that women were affected when those rockets hit the moon. And I've now talked to a couple of women directly and asked them about their time, and one woman in particular brought it to me and told me about it and what she experienced. And she said that she experienced abnormal menstrual cycle, painful menstrual cycle, etc., etc. So this means that whatever is done to the moon is actually going to affect the physical body of our women here. So for those that are adept, they know that the moon plays a large role in the occult, probably the largest. There's more lunar things going on here on this dimension than possibly solar things. So what would all this really imply if we continue to go on and we find out that as far as pheromones are concerned, that females actually emit the same pheromones as iguanas, but men don't do that. And then when we look into the ancient text, we see that there is some type of relationship between the woman and the reptile that is just kept under wraps as an omen, meaning that something that is very deep, but no one will talk about, and it has a very deep spiritual inclination or insinuation. So basically what I began to discover was, with this manipulation that is taking place, woman is being continuously used to bring forward the energies that are necessary to keep the dimension in its level of delusion. And I'll explain this. And we'll also, this is not at all about just what the women are doing. Like, I have a whole thing to go through next week about what the men are doing. But it's about time that someone highlights what we're all doing, since we're all men and women, we're all adults, we're tending to be adults here, we're tending to ascend here. We need to talk about what's really going on so that no one's fooled anymore about what they're doing, and they can do it to the fullest now. Meaning that if you're going to choose one of these paths and religions and dogmas, you just need to know exactly what you're getting involved in, so that way when the repercussions begin to take place, you're not standing there like, oh, I didn't know that was really going to happen, because you understand exactly what you're involved in. This also gives the person who doesn't want to be involved at all more of a reason why not to be. Understand, there's balance that must take place, and balance means kind of pulling oneself out of all of this belief system and dogma and beginning to create your own, to become your own creator. But again, in order for that to happen, then you have to understand what needs to be undone, what needs to be removed, and what certain things really do. And so I have here a chart of the ancient language from Hebrew going into hieroglyph, which people can kind of take a look at on when you get some time to see the transformation of letters. But in addition, you'll see many different secrets here behind, like when you look at the shin or the W and it says the sun, you'll get many secrets here about what these symbols really mean, because the double twined serpents that you see on Hermes Caudacea staff or that particular staff, one of those serpents is the sun and the other one is the moon, according to them. They're saying that there was a greater light to rule the day and a lesser night to rule the night. And that symbolizes two serpents to them as far as the depth that practice into this particular initiatory system. And so what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with the energy that they're pulling, they've already deemed in their mind as coming from a serpent. So it doesn't matter if it is or if it isn't. What we imagine is going to happen. So I wanted to go all the way to this number 7, this intoning, before I start to get into other parts of this message for today. What I discovered is that when you're hearing frequencies, and there'll be a lot on this in a moment, I'm going to be posting up a lot of things. We're just getting frequencies into FLAC files, meaning lossless files, or files that can actually contain all of the sound itself, because when you convert into things like MP3 format, you lose certain frequencies. And so what we're doing is we're converting these files, and what I found is, in a deeper meditation, is that there's another way to speak. And this way is simply making the tone itself with your mind, not humming it, not saying it or whatever, but actually making tones that you hear with inside your mind during meditation, and this allows you to be able to communicate. Because what happens here, what's happening now is that the ears as a receptor, there's so many things that can come into the ears, but there's very few things that can come out of the mouth. The mouth has a certain frequency range, and it's very limited compared to what can actually go in the ears. So let's say the ears can hear up to 20,000 hertz. The mouth can only speak up to, let's say, 20 hertz. So there's a whole wave, thousands of wavelengths, millions of wavelengths in there that can never be emitted from the mouth. So this means that there's another way of communicating, and that communication is right where your forehead is. Foreheads. Okay? On your forehead, there is a whole sensory frontal lobe system that is built to project frequency. And language itself is so dumbed down, so weak, that when you project language with your mind, it doesn't do very much. This is why mind reading, mind controlling, and things like that are really only done by the adept, because the adept is speaking a whole different language. It's speaking a language of symbols. Because and they can fire symbols. Now, right back on the top again, firing symbols from the mind, firing sounds from the mind. If you look again at that picture that looks like a blackboard, you'll see Saturn there, right? And, in the esoteric world, it's just Sa, but we'll just call it Sat for now. Or Ass sometime, which is a heavy occult word. On one side, and he's 6. And then you have on the other side L's, which they represent themselves by 7. Then if you invert either of these stars, and the only way you can tell with the 6-pointed star is if it's interlaced, then it brings forth the lower sphere of a 4-sided sphere. So basically what you're dealing with is not as cookie cutter as most people are making it seem. Merkabah leads the parts to Saturn. You turn your body into one, that will be the limit of your sphere, meaning that you can only travel within that. Some understand how to do the same thing with the dodecahedron, which is basically a hyperdimensional pentagram. Some understand how to do that with the octagon itself in a 2-dimensional standpoint. So there's this whole thing going on, and what I'm here to do on the dimension right now is to unveil, as they said, no one's unveiled Isis. Oh, until now, because Isis is not a woman. That's what they're saying happens when you unveil Isis, you find out it's not even a woman. So the thing is that when you're looking, what you're literally looking at here is you're dealing with something of extraterrestrial origin. They're going, what is under there then? Something of extraterrestrial origin. We'll just put it like that. So what you're dealing with here is that sat, you get that in your word satellite. So if you look at E3, Earth, you'll see these satellites, which are like 2-dimensional crescents themselves. You see these satellites sending signals to Saturn. There's a constant tapping and watching of what's going on Earth, virtual reality. Then when you understand the L's in the Elven kingdoms, high kingdoms, in fact, that 7-pointed star is called the Elven star. For those, the 7 sisters of the Pleiades, that's what it means. It's the Elven star. Go look it up. So the Elvens are the high blood elf races that were here, elf waves. Every single thing that you hear is a being. So if you tap into 23 megahertz or 23 hertz, and there's pictures of this on the Cymatics post, you'll see the being there. You can see his face. You can make it out as clear as day. That's number 23. Regardless of where that frequency is played, it will evoke that being. And so every day when we're talking, we're doing a complete evocation, occultation. Where we're walking, as we talked about before, there seems to be a hidden occultation going on here on this planet where people are doing things like they sit down, they go to the kitchen, they make clip pentagram off of a newspaper, but we're clipping a coupon, didn't notice the pentagram was on the back. Lay it down, it may be dark in the room, light a candle, then forget where their keys are, walk in a circle, then find their keys and go sit back down, and the occultation has begun right before they go to sleep. This is the level of which things are being controlled. And the elite, as they call themselves, so-called elite, it's much worse with them. They can't even see any of it. They only see themselves. They're caught up in I, the dragon. Okay? So let's go forward here, and I wanted to talk about sold. It's a very interesting word because it's literally a triple connotation. Sold as a word means that it's been bought for money. But as a word, it also means something just was put inside you, like a soul is now inside of you. I've been sold, S-O-U-L-E-D. Then when you take it apart using the code itself, you have S, old, and we know S is the symbol of the serpent. It means serpent, so it's the old snake. He sold. So how is it that the Kundalini is indicated, and the Chi energy is indicated as a serpentine snake type energy? Soul, or having a soul, is indicated as you have a snake inside of you. SG1, they chop off the head, the snake falls out. Star Wars, the queen inserts a snake into the clone. Matrix, a snake is pulled, or a worm-like thing is pulled out from the belly button. What are they saying here? So we'll keep going. Scrolling down past the picture of the actual charts of the language, past the picture of the indigenous storyteller, and to the next picture you'll come to what they say here is the human brain. What I began to discover is that we actually had two hemispheres, two planets within our brain. One side was one planet, one side was the other, and the middle was the actual portal. They call this the fissure, gray matter. Fissure king. So in this center of this is called the corpus callosum, it's supposed to light up. It's supposed to be full of these basically very small wires, to get a visual on it, that have an electric current running across them so they can take the information from one side of the brain and send it to the other so that way you can put things together. You don't have these things working, it doesn't connect, nothing connects. You're just like, you're confused, you're trapped in a vibrational frequency. Your other side of the brain is actually containing all your hyperdimensional information. The right side of the brain is containing hyperdimensional information. The left side of the brain is containing all Earth's construct and firmware. So what you're really dealing with here is in this picture, you see they show a picture of two serpents here wrapping themselves around the brain as if one is blocking the actual communication from the other. This is like the sun and the moon. Then you start to see why when they say the big transformation started to take place in all these movies like Heroes, and there's several movies, but they show you there's an eclipse that generally starts to take place when a person is going into their higher selves or higher being or just transmuting. Because this is the time in which the sun's energy is fully amplifying the moon. And so the moon is sending across all these ideas of what we should be and what we should be doing and who we should serve and what program we're going to take next. And then during the eclipse, it gets a chance to turn it on high so that it fully affects. And then during the full moon, it's on high again so that the program can continue to seep in. And then the whole environment is being cultivated as such. How? Because most of the individuals on this dimension worship the moon to some level or another. There are solar cults, which is still another energy. So what we're dealing with here now is we're dealing with having to bridge, which you see is number 8. Bridge worlds of understanding between all of the black man, white man, Chinese, black woman, white man, white woman, Chinese woman, all these different spectrums that we think are existing, which are not. We have to build a bridge to them in order for us to get a total collective consciousness of ascension going on. So I'm going to take this moment. We're going to take, I think we should be around the top of the hour. Check the timing here. Yep. About at the top of the hour. Actually, we're at an hour. This is only an hour and a half show, by the way. And for those that are just tuning in, this is www.matrixunderground.com. I want to take a moment to answer questions because this post has been up for about a week now. So those that have looked at it may have had some questions about things that are here. And if not, then I can finish off with some notes that I took this morning, and we could just go from there. So I'm going to let Sun scan the call system and just let me know if there's anything out there.
Okay. Jahara asks, Orion, in the interpretation of Edgar Cayce, it was mentioned that if we could remove the belt of Orion, what is meant by this?
First of all, a lot of this propaganda, this New Age propaganda, because, this is the raw papers, this is all of that. The Orion saga, which, we can send a link on for those that are interested in that link, is very extensive. So anyone that wants to really get involved with the wars between EA, Enlil, Tetra, and the rest of the club, High Father, Dark Side, all the rest of these beings that exist in Orion, because it's like a family up there, a big family, and Earth is very preliminary to Orion. And so what's going on is that now the belt of Orion is from my understanding, 3 stars make up the belt of Orion, and these stars are also known as the 3 magi: Melchior, Belteshazzar, and I kind of forget the other. However, what we're really dealing with here now is that these systems are so extensive. Like, I could take a person through the occult all year, explaining to you, like you see on number 4, Pooh, Pan, Puck, Baphomet, Bacchus, bacteria, how it starts on the low level, the abyss, Crowleyan, up inverted, Satanist, 7-pointed stars, elven queens with rings. I can take you all over this virtual reality, showing you different parts of what are supposed to lead us out of here. The fact of the matter is that to make it so simple, it just boils back into energy. The only thing that really needs to be removed from an individual is, one, their emotions. Emotions, whether they're good or bad, like when you get very happy about something, it's almost setting a person up to become very sad about what is going to happen next. Because if you like the car, eventually the car is going to get old and you're not going to like the car anymore. So it's going to cause at a certain point the actual opposite feeling, emotion. So what happens now is that we're really at a level where we can take these old dogmas and myths, take the good stuff out of it and astringe it, but if it's anything telling us that you have to do so and such and such, and it's all in code, of course, in order to get out. Like they say, well, you have to ride the white dragon through the pole star in order to leave the dimension because Alpha Draconis is wrapped around our pole star. That's a code. So if a person can't understand exactly what that means, it only becomes more of a stumbling block to them. So what we're saying is that, you know, what I'm saying about the three belts of Orion and what they say, they're saying that basically you have to evoke the magical path of the three wise magi in order to completely have the totality of what's going on in this dimension. Is that true? The magical paths of the magi are so deep, it would probably take one multiple lifetimes to penetrate one. What we're really looking at here now is that we're looking at the new mind has now, which is really not a mind at all. It's like something else. It's getting new terms. We have to be open to our own increase. We have to understand this stuff that's been given to us before is just a layout. It's not the whole thing. Let me tell you why. What would give you the whole thing anyway? Like they say, okay, when the extraterrestrials gave us technology, do you think they gave us the best stuff? No. Why would they give us the best stuff? Why would they give us the stuff that even if we used it wrong could take them out? That's not what happened. So what we're dealing with is we're dealing with a construct and pieces of a puzzle in itself that we have to put together. And then we have a race also that we're in that we must figure out the whole part of the puzzle before the puzzle is completely complete. Meaning that on the dimension has a finite amount of time to complete its puzzle before it begins its transition phase. All transition phases equal turbulence for individuals that are not prepared for them. So all these ideas that it'll be a smooth transfer, it will be if people stop playing with the pentagram. It will be if people can leave Jesus and the rest of the Orion saga alone. It will be if the Chinese can stop worshiping the dragon. It will be if the Hindus leave Shiva and Kali and the rest of the destroyers alone. But you see that what's really going to happen here on Earth is not happening for everyone, but happening with individuals. This type of structure has always been like this because it's an ME. It's an actual construct that is continuously running to allow some of the individuals that you're looking at that are seen to be coming from a mammalian life form, meaning that they used to live as animals before. And on that level of consciousness, all of us have been through those levels of consciousness, to be able to actually now go walk into a store and buy what can give you the Philosopher's Stone, if you understand your alchemy. So it's opening that up, but everyone's not accepting that. Where are they going? Meaning that if you're actually saying, well, we're going to all leave the dimension, okay, well, where are we going? Are we going to a new Earth? Is there taxes there? And so what I'm saying is that there's a lot more to what's exactly happening here on Earth, and that people now have the opportunity to investigate that. They have an opportunity to do it with individuals that know more about what's going on. They have the cipher. They have the books. And all this means is there will be no excuse. Now, the frequency itself of this planet is altering the consciousness of this planet rapidly. The moon is being utilized to do such things. A person, in order to be impenetrable to such things, needs to get full control of their mind. And they need to understand exactly what energy is, exactly how not to allow their energy to be manipulated, exactly what the occult is, how people are utilizing the occult, how two-dimension works on two-dimension, how sigils work, stories of what's really happening here that are the most important, and they need to gather together with other individuals in order to stay close in this time of transition that is surely to be the biggest transmission that we've seen. And that's really where we're at. And, son, do you have any more questions there? Okay, I'm going to give a moment for Sun because sometimes he does actually pause his line. I'm going to go ahead and start going through some of these notes that I had here today in this last, I believe we have 20 more minutes on the line. The first thing that I had here was talking about fear. And how fear, okay, first of all, your pheromones and your scent. What this is about is that when you wear different scents, and that's what oils are really about, you actually put an auric field around you, and that's why certain oils can put in an auric field around your body. Certain oils can be rubbed on chakras to increase the power of that chakra. So, when you sweat or when you give off your pheromones, these pheromones also correspond to your aura. What's most interesting is that the sweat that you get from jogging is not the same kind of sweat that a person starts to break out in when they're in fear. It's a totally different pheromone. And so I wanted people to understand that the way the energy is pulled is by basically the level of pheromone that's being exerted from the body. That's what becomes more entertaining for whatever could be trying to get that energy or whatever energy you're trying to attract. If you're trying to attract something positive, then there's a certain smell and things that are associated with that. And if you're trying to attract something negative, there goes the sewer. And so the thing is that these are things that we need to be aware of, because even with our fears will manipulate the environment that we're in if we're seeking to get into some type of experiment. For those who have seen the quantum communication video, which is very important to take a look at, it starts to discuss things as when other people are in the room in a real experiment on a quantum level, that they cannot be involved in those experiments from an observer level if they're in doubt or what they call conscious, because conscious in this sense being a person who is not just observing, they're actually looking at it to determine whether it's going to happen. Even in their mind, they're thinking maybe it's not going to happen. This actually takes the wavelength of the experiment, or quantum experiment, down to zero. So this means that if you're in the room and you're attempting to manifest something very positive, and there's someone in the room with you that knows how to manifest, or generally they know this by default, how to manifest negativity or manifest doubt, then they collapse your wavelength. So be aware of that. I wanted to talk about also...
Seven.
Yeah.
I thought I had a moment to jump in there. We did have a hand raised in the queue, and I also wanted to there were some questions asked. What do you mean by transmission, and can you explain the dragon symbolism? I'm not sure if those are specific, but I did want to jump in there so I could get this caller with this hand raised.
Okay, well, let me answer that real quick. So the transmission in itself is that there's always a communication that's going on between us and all these planetary spheres, planets, influences, etc. So there's a big transmission that's going on now because of the lineup. The lineup is allowing there to be multiple frequencies that are open that are normally too far from each other. So this is basically like your house phone doesn't work on the same wavelength your cell phone does. You try to take your house cordless phone, it can only go so far, while your cell phone can go a lot further. So it's the same thing. There's certain energies that we correspond to certain levels of knowledge, because I don't doubt it at all. We'll eventually travel this whole galaxy, but the information from those quadrants and places are closest to us at times, and that's where we're at. As far as the dragon symbolism, it's everywhere. So a person would have to ask a general question to understand, to allow me to break down one particular part of it. But it's basically in everything. It's the level of control where something has erected itself as God over everything by continuously convincing a person from all angles that they really are God. My God is not a snake. In fact, my God doesn't even go by that name, God. So that's the thing. Until people start learning how to unlock themselves from that, then they can stay here with Ouroboros. And he will continue, or it will continue, because it's androgynous to my understanding, to run societies as such. These can be looked at as training cycles or prisons, depending upon which one floats your boat. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to rise beyond this, then you have to leave dominion. And as we talked about before, this dominion of God and belief that there is something that is higher than you that is requiring you to bow down and worship it. If there's something that's higher than you, that's like you asking your children to bow down and worship you because you're older than them. You want a level of respect, yes, but how much is it going to benefit the child to continuously bow down and worship and war with other children that belong to other fathers and mothers, etc., especially when we're all connected? So, did you want to go ahead and let that call in?
Okay, this is area code 505. You have your hand up. I'm going to unmute your phone. Just say your name.
How much time do we have?
From. We have 14 minutes left.
Okay.
So just say your name, where you're from, and then you can ask your question.
Hey, Sevan, this is Nima in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is good timing from Dominion. Dominion,
Nima.
you have Domingo, which is the sun. And can you elaborate a little bit on the sun and how the sun is changing and actually yin within yang and how it's female as opposed to, the moon? What is the sun's influence on the earth and the frequency through people right now? If you could elaborate on that, that'd be excellent. Thanks.
Well, basically, the more I continue to pour into it and the more I continue to sit in meditation, what's really being transmitted across is that these lights are our influence. That when you're, just like in your zodiac, when you're born, a star appears first, and then you appear here on the planetary system that you correspond to. And then the larger bodies or celestial bodies that are around you begin to affect your attitude and behavior, and that's how they're able to tell by zodiac what a person's personality and way of being is going to be. And so the sun and the moon, as another fractal for us on the planet, have the highest level of influence on us. If we can look at ourselves as a species and look how far we've gone, still burning oil, still doing different things that we've already been able to highlight as not going to get us into progress, we can probably look at the sun and the moon as being more responsible for that than us because they're more stronger than us. And so this becomes a touchy area because most people don't like to gather into these things because we love to be grateful, which is fine, and we love to accept what we're dealing with and to be appreciative, which is fine. But the fact of the matter is that there's always people that come to the planetary system that have a better idea of exactly what should be taking place and exactly what level we should be going to, such as AC being introduced and different things of that nature. So what I see with the sun and the moon now is I see influence. I see the sun emitting vitamin D. I see vitamin D as substance D. I see that when a person is out of the sun for a very long time, it seems like they can really they go a lot more lucid, meaning that the dream world becomes a lot more real than this actual reality itself when one is not affected too much by the sun. In addition to that, I do still see the sun as an energy source that is a lot more clearer than the moon. And this is because the level of influence from the moon has showed itself in the occult to be not positive, meaning that, and people need to understand, my positive and negative is like a positive and negative from an electron microscope. I'm not the positive and negative from the latest occult novel. So what I see with the moon and the lunar cult is that it's now, if whatever it was before, if it was something good, it's not that now, because all it is leading a person into what I've witnessed recently with some of these moon goddess communities, walking in the shape of Visikas, draining energy from other individuals that are around in a more of like a witch-type behavior or coven-type behavior, completely being very negative towards the men, as if we're the complete originators of everything going on in this society, still never realizing that we're actually still in a matriarch. The queen still runs everything. So the thing is that that's what I see with these celestial bodies, that they've been influencing the human race, because without both of these celestial bodies would be complete darkness. And because people are afraid of darkness, then they like, well, if we didn't have the sun, then we wouldn't be able to see. Now, if you didn't have a body, you should see what happens next. Basically, the sun and seeing and all this has to do with something that's material-based. But the spirit in itself, what I have to say in this, I'm glad you brought this up, is because what I'm coming to realize is that if you accept too much of what this reality consists of, then when it ends, so will you. Because this thing is on a time clock. I have other pictures, and that's why this is going to be a part 2, because I have a picture of clocks, ancient clocks that were depicting this whole cycle that we're going through now as a clock. And these clocks are really, I say clocks when you remove the L out of them, these clocks is phallic, This is the part of our dimension that we're seeing is under the influence. And so it goes a lot deeper because we've been able to definitely trace back some of these, some of the reptilian life forms as being able to emit these kind of energies. If you understand, even in the Kabbalah and in a lot of the Grimoires, when it begins to talk about the radiance of the angels, or when you go into definitely the Kabbalah in the book of, I can't remember exactly the book, but the book itself, it talks about basically the energy of some of these beings that are up there, and in comparison to the sun. So the sun I see, as I just was looking at this other this indigenous document, is called 100 Suns, and so that's what we're really dealing with. We're dealing with celestial bodies. The sun is a little bit different than the moon. The moon seems to be an artificial base of some sort, a Death Star. Why the sun seems to be an actual body, a spiritual body of energy that is carrying in the indigenous days a female energy. The moon, if it's just a celestial body, if it's just a artificial celestial body, is not male or female. It's artificial. It's AI. Now, the interesting thing is that you see an eye in the middle of the moon on this picture that I have on the board. David Icke has another picture like that shows the eye in the middle of the moon. But if you look at this chart of languages and you look under, I believe it's the third chart. You see here is third, second. Yep, on the second chart you see an I, which is the Hebrew letter Yod, but the actual pronunciation is I, the I. And so this is how you have to keep relaying it back, because it shows here, it just shows the eye, but an eye of what? Just the eyeball? No, it's the eye of a dragon. And so this is where it all starts to connect, because we're able to cross over these religions. Our Babel is not as such anymore because we have the internet. We have this level of communicating with other people that have been a little bit deeper in the occult and experiencing a different part of the occult, and they're coming and we're comparing notes and we're saying, well, whoa, there's something else entirely going on here.
Okay, Nima, thanks for your question. I'm going to mute your mic now, unless you had another question.
That's it for now. Thanks, man.
No doubt. So we have 7 minutes. Yeah, thanks a lot, Nima. You have 7 minutes left, Sevan.
Okay, so I'm going to go over this list real quick, and we're not going to take any more calls because I want to make sure that this all gets out. Rules and roles. There's only a difference in vowel here, R-U-L-E-S, R-O-L-E-S. So, of course, the construct of the matrix means rules. There's rules here. Anytime you can jump and you fall to the ground, there's a rule. So the thing is that what it is on this dimension is that everyone that could choose to fit one of these meaningless roles in life, which is basically just taking away from the earth and doing what they want to do and not thinking they're in the collective, et cetera, they're in the roles. They're in the small pieces of a clock. Now, remember, in the Matrix, if these rules, these words are the same, they say the rules, some can be bent, some can be broken. So that means that whatever role you're in spiritually, because every person that's in a spiritual path is playing a role, some of those roles can be bent and some can be broken, meaning that there is a way to go through occult knowledge and not go by the system of occult knowledge and just bend and break some of the rules, take certain things to get yourself to a higher level. Because remember, most of these systems are built to fit the agenda of whoever wrote the document itself. Generally, it's from a hyperdimensional standpoint. It's not just some king who's authenticating it. There's another being there that is instructing it for it to come through them. So, the waveform is the rule. This waveform here that we're in that's making us perceptive of the world as we see it is a particular rule in place. Now, what's generally going on with people right now is they're given just enough energy as far as, because there is a vampiric thing going on in the dimension where a person's energy is being drained by a lot of these electromagnetic devices, etc. And we have things to counteract this, and that's why people should log in, www.resistance2010.com, and download some of the free downloadable tools, frequencies, and things to change your environment. But what you're dealing with here is that you're dealing with, they pull just enough energy, they pull all the energy and keep you with just enough to remain on this wavelength. And so that's how you break the wavelength, is increasing the energy and the vibration oscillation within the body in order to be perceptive of what goes on beyond this. In addition to that, I'm reading through actually some stuff here. Channel saturation, relaxation. We're going to get more into it. The next interview, we're going to get more into the Mars connection going on here on Earth, because Mars in itself, which is also Ram, it's remained kind of hidden, and this is what I was talking about the veils being pulled off. The more you come into the esoteric knowledge, you'll notice that certain planets have just been kind of playing in the background as if they're not involved at all. But Mars being so close to our Earth in proximity, what being a portal is, definitely open up between here and Mars. Mars is called the red planet. There's supposed to be tons of beings here still from Mars. Many of those beings go by the name Maria, or Miriam, and many different names. So there's basically a whole colony of things that went on Mars. Still contains Ma within the name. Ma, I wanted to point out, M means is equivalent to the number 12, and of course A is equivalent to the number 1, is in Aleph, and so that makes Ma mean 13. I think people should really understand that and the symbolism behind the number 13. I was talking about here very briefly, there's going to be a new construct that's being formulated now, meaning a new system in order for everyone to go by that's a lot more pure, a new language of cymatics, something that our brain was originally on and how our body originally works, that allow us to be able to change our DNA and to be able to reconstruct things from a level of thought, which moves faster than light beams. So the thing is that that's really where we're at now. I know that we're almost at the close of the show, and I just wanted to take this time, just this last part of the time of the show. Son, how much time do we actually have left here?
We're at 3 minutes left.
Okay. I wanted to take this time in order for everyone to know that next Sunday, or every Sunday, we're going to try to keep it up. Either we're going to do a radio show, or we're going to do the Skype question and answer. But on the next show, the next time we get together, next Sunday, we're going to do manifestation. We're going to work on everyone thinking at the same time what we all can agree upon during that call in order to speed up things for other people, because we have a lot of energy that we have here, a lot of energy that can be channeled to people. I have a friend that is a part of a very important network that's called the Karma Experiment, and for those that are interested in that, definitely send me a link in an email, and then maybe I'll even have her on next show when we do have one, so she can explain some of the things that she's doing. And I just want everyone to know that this is definitely being taken care of. Everyone that's in the know now is fully aware of what's needing to be done, or becoming aware of that, and we have all the energy that's necessary to do it. The reason why salvation hasn't come, if you want to use that term, to this planetary system is because it's already deemed that the humans can do it themselves if they want to. And so we'll just take this time to go ahead and close out, sending wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, letting everyone be mindful of their frequency and to keep their emotion under control. And if they need me, they know how to get in touch with me. And I'm going to let Son go ahead and take us out with something on the call queue or on the music queue. And once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in on this Sunday.
What are they doing to them?
There was a lot more data that was brought by David Icke that allows us to get to a higher level of knowledge, because when we combine that with the data that we already have, the pieces begin to fit, making us whole. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about this word woman. A while ago, when I was ciphering words, as is done all day, remember that we're cracking a code. We're cracking into what we call the code of the matrix, or the meaning behind the words, and we're taking the language that's most relevant and primarily used by us, which happens to be English. We're basically catering to a crowd that speaks English, at least as their secondary language. But because English itself is a language that has swept the world and everyone is being encouraged to learn that language, we decided to pull the language apart from an esoteric standpoint. That led to many things. It led to many epiphanies and synchronistic occurrences on the dimension, and it leads to what I believe is a very high level of enlightenment on this dimension, because whether you want to accept the information or not, you have a finite system to go by that allows you to be able to determine whether or not something is true or false. So where we're at now in this is because what I begin this post is talking about First Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 through 9. And I thought it very important that I start today's message off with this, because I want to say, I said in the beginning so that I wanted to say a few things, and I guess this is the final thing. In your reality, when you begin to become conscious, you begin to associate with conscious individuals, and some people use Facebook as that channel because it's the most popular at this point. And you have those people that are communicating on your page and sending you emails, and you may at times believe that the enlightenment is coming to the whole world. And true enough, enlightenment is definitely spreading. MatrixUnderground.com, that's www.matrixunderground.com. What we do is we have an interactive show where people are allowed to follow along with what we're presenting, and we also have pictures, sometimes movies associated with the particular topic that we're discussing. And once again, for those that are tuning into that, that's www.matrixunderground.com. So the title of the show again was Our Complex, the Catch-22 and Cold Woman Omen. That's the original title of the show, although it's been adjusted somewhat. And this came about because a good friend of the Resistance, a lady by the name of Jahara, sent David Icke's recent book, which is Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More. And it took a while for that book to get to me because I am in a foreign country. I'm in a foreign country, and but once I was able to get the book, I was able to absorb a few chapters that were key to me, so I can just put a lot more of my data together that I've been gathering myself on the dimension. I did find the book personally to be a good read. It is very repetitious, but they, of course, say repetition is the key to getting through to people. Anyone that has read David Icke's work, there are a few chapters of some new things that have been added to his whole collection of knowledge. And in general, the book is written for individuals that are just beginning to understand what's taking place on the dimension, to begin to go from a process of a stair-stepping process, meaning learning the basics and then getting into the deeper stuff. But in this, there was a lot of questions that were being sent to me about what David Icke was explaining in regards to the moon matrix, or the control system that's been taking place from the moon, and whether I thought that's authentic or not. And of course, with not having read the complete part in itself, then I couldn't give them a judgment on what I felt about the perspective David Icke himself was coming from, but I do know of a lot of the different involvements that have been taking place on the moon. But good day, Resistance. This is Esoteric Radio, and we wanted to thank everyone for tuning in to the show today. We wanted to send wholeness and balance vibration out. It is Sunday, August the 8th, and we are broadcasting a phenomenal show today titled Esoteric, Our Complex, the Catch-22, and the Cold Woman Omen. And I'm your host, along with my co-host. I'm your host, Sevan, and my co-host is Sun. And I'm going to allow just for a moment for Sun to say a couple things before we get right into this. This show is scheduled for an hour and a half. There's a lot of content that needs to be covered today. In fact, this might just be the part one of this particular series because there's just so much information to bring out. And before I get right into this, Son, are you connected on the line?
Yes, you can hear me clear?
I can hear you loud and clear, baby.
I just wanted to say wholeness to Resistance family, and just look forward to building with you guys. We have a lot to show you in the future, and just hold on and enjoy the show.
Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remember the goal of all of our work is to get everyone into higher stages of enlightenment. And it's quite a trip. This is a trip that we're all taking together. I'm just a little aggressive at pursuing the truth, and what I do is I find through the cipher what I know to be the truth, and I bring that information back to my brothers and sisters and present it before them because we feel that is a noble deed. In addition to that, because we are in a reality that is interwoven and connected, that means that ascension to individuals on this planetary system would mean ascension for everyone else that is attempting to achieve that. And so this is our attempt at doing that, and I only say attempt in these cases because it still is a person's choice. So we will present the facts, we'll present a lot of information, especially the illustrations of what exactly is taking place on this dimension, and then we leave it up to the listener, the viewer, or the studier, the seeker, etc., to make their own decision on what has been presented. I wanted to start off the show today by saying a few things, and one is that keeping in mind that spiritual or esoteric knowledge and the quest to obtain what would be called the Great Arcanum, the Philosopher's Stone, the Panacea, etc., is a life's quest, and that extends multiple lives. It's an ever quest. And so at times when you're receiving information, it's very vast, and sometimes you feel like you don't understand. And I wanted to let everyone know that that is perfectly fine, that it is your subconscious mind that picks up a great deal of information. And if you allow the information to pass through you and allow your body to absorb that information, then you can feel what's necessary for you to hear at this moment. I would also like to say that everything is in perspective, meaning that you can look at a situation two ways, always on a binary dimension, and there will be always one of those ways in which it benefits you. Much of what we'll talk about now, today, is actually about the history of mankind that's embedded within the language and embedded within the symbolism that is choosing to be evoked by the dimension. And but that does allow us at times to go into areas that are a little bit touchy for individuals. I would also like to say that in the history of man, because we are in a womb, we are in a matrix or a ma, what they say is a womb, a place where something is cultivated. At times it is dark, and that is just a phase of the primordial part of existence. And then when one gets into higher stages of understanding the totality of existence, that's where things begin to have a higher hue or spectrum. So we'll get right in. For those that are looking to interact with the interactive show, we are available now at www. It's becoming something that's a lot more popular, especially within the younger crowds. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily enlightenment. I would just say it's the occult. The occult itself is becoming more popular in the younger crowds, and it's becoming just as popular as bell bottoms. And what I want everyone to understand is that for those that are engaging into the esoteric works, is that there is still, and I'd like to be conservative, 92% of the world that is not engaging in real acts of enlightenment or esoteric knowledge. They're still stuck under belief systems and dogmas that are structured for the political agendas of this kingdom. So it's of great importance for those that already understand their level of adeptness. They know that they still have the duty of bringing their knowledge and their particular path or role to the individuals that are around them. So never can we fool ourselves at any point to believe that the greater percentage of this dimension is becoming enlightened. That's not what's happening right now. That is something that we want to make happen. Still understanding also, we approach all of what we do with a very rational, very exact standpoint. There's no use in dreaming. We need exact information and actual information. And so where that leads us to at this point is it leads us to examining everything for its authenticity and bringing real-time information back to our brothers and sisters to let them know where we're exactly at, where is our status on the dimension. Furthermore, I'll talk a little bit just briefly about the 100th monkey syndrome, which is being mentioned now a lot, especially in the areas of individuals who are aspiring to become adept and aspiring to change the world with their message or with their method. And they speak of that if they can allow we can allow this ascension to come to 100th monkey point, which means, well, one person gets it at the 100th monkey or the 100th person, then everyone starts to do